Good morning, everybody. It's very disturbing news from Ukraine that I heard yesterday. Gonzalo Lira, that many of you may know, who has done excellent reporting and coverage of the situation in Ukraine and on many other topics on YouTube and many other platforms, has been arrested by the Ukrainian security services, the SBU in Ukraine. And there is an article published which has been republished in lots of places. And this is, I'm reading here from Yahoo's Yahoo News that has republished this from the New Voice of Ukraine. And I'll just read through the article and comment on this as I go. So it says, according to, the title is Pro-Russian Blogger Gonzalo Lira Detained in Kharkov. Well, that's biased to begin with. It says there, according to investigation, the man is a citizen of a Latin American country. Yes, he is. He's a citizen of Chile, but has lived in Kharkov for several years. That's also true. He got stuck there at the beginning of the conflict. He was arrested a year ago for a week. He just disappeared. I was very concerned about his whereabouts there. I made a couple of videos last April when he was arrested by the forces there, the security services there. But then he was released just and turned up again. I was very, very relieved, as were a lot of people after that. But he was told that one of the conditions was he wasn't allowed to leave the city. So he had to stay in Kharkov. Of course, there's no way that he could leave because everywhere in the surrounding territory is controlled by the Ukrainian security services. So if he's told by them he's not allowed to leave the city, he'd try to leave, he wouldn't get very far and he'd be rearrested. So basically he's been holed up in an apartment in Kharkov for the last year, not being allowed to go anywhere. And all he can do basically is make videos, which is what he's been doing for the last year. I was on his show, the Round Table that he started up about a year ago, and I spoke to him and a couple of other people for an hour and a half. Had a good show, and he's done dozens of those shows over the year, which are very, very informative and have a lot of knowledge in those shows. They're worth listening to. But anyway, I'll go on with what this article says. Law enforcement authorities accuse him of supporting Russian occupation and valorizing Moscow's apparent war crimes during the war. So that's what they're accusing him of. He obviously has opinions and he's made commentary on the conflict, but that's what they're accusing him of, the wrong opinions. Additionally, he is said to have engaged in attempts to discredit Ukraine's highest military and political leadership. Well, this is something that, they could say about me. So, for example, if I went to Ukraine, I've been very, very critical of the Zelensky regime and the associated neo-Nazi battalions like the Azov battalion, which have been killing and shelling ethnic Russians in the Donbass for 8 years, since 2014. I've said that on GB News, and I've said that on Talk TV in the UK. So he has not said anything. I don't think that well, he might have said some things that I wouldn't have said, but certainly I've said some of the things that are of a different opinion to that which would be offered by the Zelensky regime. So the Western mainstream media and politicians in power go on about restoring freedom and democracy in Ukraine or in the world, when actually there is no freedom there. There is no free speech because they're arresting someone who's critical of the government. And everyone should have the right to be critical of the government if they see that they're doing something that they don't agree with, particularly if it involves a campaign of murder for 8 years before this phase of the Ukraine conflict began. So I'll carry on. In spring 2022, he filmed provocative videos showing the faces of Ukrainian soldiers and insulting the country's defenders. I don't know about that, to be honest. He posted the videos on YouTube and Twitter, where he has nearly 300,000 subscribers. Well, you know what? Posting videos showing the faces of Ukrainian soldiers. This is what the mainstream media in the West were doing for 8 years. Before the Ukraine conflict started in 2022 here, there was so many reports about Ukraine having a Nazi problem, Ukraine having a white supremacy problem. Actually, a lot of the left-wing outlets that are now gung-ho for war in Ukraine were actually saying, isn't it terrible there's all these neo-Nazi battalions, showing pictures of them with their faces standing with neo-Nazi paraphernalia and banners. That was happening for 8 years in the mainstream media in the West. Now the people that are supporting the Zelensky regime and are doing the very things that they've accused Gonzalo Lira of doing and breaking the law by doing. That's what's going on. So I'll continue here. The SBU has also accused him of denying the facts of Russian missile strikes on Ukrainian cities and the mass killings of civilians by the invading forces. Well, again, some of the reporting of certain events in the Western mainstream media coming from the Zelensky regime is taken from their angle. And of course, there's propaganda from both sides in any conflict. The Ukrainian side will issue propaganda. The Russian side will issue propaganda. In any event, both sides will try to spin and make out it was the other side's fault. Now, you've got to make up your own mind about what's going on here. But this is the whole sort of question that is coming up all over the West at the moment. It happened with the lockdowns and the injections as well. They're trying to bring in new laws which criminalise spreading misinformation, whatever misinformation is. So that means, essentially, if you don't parrot the government line, you can be accused of misinformation, or in this case, what it says is denying the facts of whatever the Ukrainian government there says is the facts. If you deny what they say are the facts, then that's a crime. This is basically like Bolshevik communism or Chinese communism that is now operating in Ukraine. So it's not a country of freedom and democracy like the Western mainstream and governments would make out. So it says also there, during a search of his possessions, law enforcement officials found mobile phones and a computer that contained evidence of his illegal activity. He hasn't done anything wrong. He's just expressed an opinion and uploaded it onto social media platforms. And so that apparently now is a crime. And he's been remanded in custody by the court and the investigation is ongoing. Now, this is terrible because he's up for 5 to 8 years in prison as a charge if these things go through and he gets found guilty of the things which the Ukrainian security forces are accusing him of having done. He's done nothing wrong. He's just expressed opinions on the internet, which everyone should have the freedom to do. So now he's found himself in this predicament. This is a terrible and appalling thing that is happening in Ukraine. Now, I will call on my government and all governments in the West to press for the immediate release of Gonzalo Lira, who should not have been arrested. He is just using his free speech, as he is allowed or should be allowed in any country in the world, whether it's a Western country, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's a communist country at present like China or North Korea, who also have similarly repressive laws attacking and undermining free speech and commentary on political situations. He should not have been arrested. That's all that I need to say about that.